Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Couch Scouts podcast. Tonight we are back continuing our Inside the Prospect series looking at the wide receiver position, and with me is my co-host, no Jackson tonight, but Mr. Rupert. How you doing?
Great, man. How about you, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to dive into this. And tonight we've got a couple of slot wide receivers. One guy that had a lot of hype coming into the year, but disappointed in a pretty major way. And then another guy that was on nobody's radar at all, and he kind of broke out this year. So two guys that kind of trended in opposite directions, and that is Washington's Jalen McMillan and Michigan's Roman Wilson. So before we get into these guys' tape, want to plug a couple of things for you guys. One is our Discord. We've got a free Discord. It is hopping, man. I I gotta be honest. Ever since I jumped on that Fantasy Football Today podcast with Heath Cummings, it blow. I think we like doubled the Discord size, and it's
I think
just
more than
always
double.
active now, which is a ton of fun. So a bunch of great guys in there, just talking trades, talking rookies, talking breaking news, all that kind of stuff. So come in there with us. We're growing the community. It's a lot of fun. We'll have a link in the description. And then the other thing I want to plug for you guys is the dynastynerds.com film room. So all of our tape that we watch to break down on the podcast for these rookies comes from that Dynasty Nerds film room. They've got hundreds of cut-ups of all 22 for basically every prospect that we're talking about. This is directly where we get our film that we're watching and studying. And you can watch a full game in under 10 minutes because we cut out all the in-between, the timeouts, the commercials, all of it. And you can see every snap that they're on the field, all the strengths and weaknesses, less than 10 minutes for each game. So, I mean, we watched 5 or 6 games on each prospect this week preparing for the podcast, and you can do it too. Form your own opinion about these guys. So you can use promo code COOP for 15% off dynastynerds.com. Highly recommend that resource. And the last thing I want to tease for you guys here before we jump into the show is we're working on a rookie guide for you guys. It is our first ever, but hopefully first annual. We're taking our stab at breaking down kind of a lot of what we've talked about on the podcast. We're going to go trait by trait, what we see, strengths, weaknesses for each prospect, along with kind of an overall conclusion, where we're at on them, where we'd take them in rookie drafts, what's our film grade, what's our ranking. So it's going to be pretty comprehensive for you guys, and we are looking to get that out for you by the week of the draft. So going into the draft, you'll kind of have our pre-draft thoughts, and then we might do a little post-draft update after we have the draft capital and landing spots to get you guys prepared for your rookie draft. So we're going to be selling that and really looking forward to getting you more details on that in a couple of weeks. That being said, let's jump into it. You ready to talk about Jalen McMillan, Rupert?
Let's go. I'm excited to talk about him.
Yeah, so Jalen McMillan, 6'1", 197 pounds. He is a senior, so he was not an early declare. He could have declared last year, chose to stay in college, along with, honestly, him and Penix and Odunze from Washington all could have declared last year, all chose to come back and make another run at it. Obviously made it all the way to the championship game, but fell short. Former 4-star prospect, Jalen McMillan is. He was the number 6 wide receiver in his class, and he had a monster junior season. So actually, draft capital wise, he might have been better off declaring last year. He had over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns on 79 receptions. Came back this year, dealt with some injuries. So let's give a little bit of context. So he only had 45 catches, 559 yards, 5 touchdowns, a major drop off from his junior season. But if you look into it, his first 2.5 games of the season, he had 20 catches, 311 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he was off to a roaring start. And then he injured his knee at the Michigan State game. And he either missed games or played briefly for the next 2 months, going without a reception for 2 months, basically. So there were a couple of those games where he would come in, play a few snaps, kind of get himself dinged up again. He kept trying to rush back, I think, but he returned for their big game against Oregon, October 14th, played just 7 snaps in the first half, didn't come back. And so it took him a while. I think just I'm sure he was frustrated, just wanting to be out there, trying to get out there, playing a few snaps, saying this isn't working. I got to sit back out. But finally, in the Pac-12 championship game, he finished with 9 catches for 131 yards against Oregon. So, I mean, and then he played in the playoffs. He had a touchdown in both of their playoff games. So when he was on the field and healthy this season, he was producing. There's this narrative that like Jalen Polk overtook him as the number 2 guy. I don't know that that's true. So I just want to give that context out there that when he played and when he was healthy this year, he was very productive, but was dealing with injury. So, context out of the way, let's get into the tape. What did you see? We'll start with route running like we always do. Go ahead, Rupert. What did you notice about Jalen McMillan as a route runner?
I thought he benefited a ton from the scheme and then also having room on the field as well. He wasn't getting, as much attention from the defensive backs when he was playing. He played in the slot a ton. He's a big slot.
Mm-hmm.
And he had tons of free releases. They're scheming him open. They're using him in motion. So he didn't have to really win off the line like a true outside receiver. I didn't see him having to fight against press very often. They always seem to be able to stack him or, just kind of make sure that he wasn't able to get pressed. So you really didn't get to see that in college very much. And it's kind of hard to translate how he'll handle it in the pros or if he's just going to stick in the slot to avoid that. So really didn't get to see a ton there as far as his release package and whatnot. He accelerates off the line pretty well. And he has good build-up speed. He's a long striding player, and he doesn't have the quickest feet and doesn't have a ton of like stop-start ability, like to be able to like plant his foot in the ground and come back on a comeback route or anything like that. But he kind of has some really slick, almost like basketball crossover moves that he can use at the stem of his route, which comprise a lot of his highlights that you've been seeing all over social media. And so I think he definitely has potential in route running, and he does very well against zones. Again, he benefited a ton from the scheme, so it's hard to say like that he's going to be a really good route runner at the next level, earn a bunch of targets. But I think he has potential in the area, even though there wasn't a ton that translates to the NFL, in my opinion. What about you?
Okay, I think I might be higher on him than you. I totally agree with you about press. I don't think I watched almost all of the tape that we had in the Dynasty Nerds film room. It was at least 5 games I watched. I don't know that I saw him get pressed a single time.
Yeah.
Like, we have a grading system, and I'm going in there trying to plug in a grade for like press release against press coverage, and I didn't know how to give him a grade because I just didn't see it.
It has
He
to be an
was
incomplete because same thing with me. Like, I don't think I saw a single time where he was pressed and had to fight off.
Yeah, so I mean, he's playing off the line. He was like almost 100% in the slot. You got Rome getting pressed a ton on the other side, getting double teams and things of that nature. So, real spread out scheme, that tons of passing volume in that offense. But overall, like what I did see, like I can't knock him because I can't say that he's bad against press because I didn't see him struggle against press. I just didn't see him get pressed. And I think some of that's because of his speed. I mean, he ran a 4.47 in the combine, which for 6'1", 197 pounds, like that's pretty fast.
Shows up on tape too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that he's got a ton of acceleration and burst, but man, when he gets up to speed, like he can move, and defense is definitely he was given a lot of cushion. It seemed like they were really respecting his speed, and that's part of why they weren't pressing him. But at the stem of his route, I thought he was one of the best that I've graded in this class. I actually gave him a 9 for route running out of 10, which that's a really high score. That anywhere like 8 is 7. Okay, just real brief. If you're new to the podcast, 6 is NFL average on our scale. 7 is good by NFL standards. 8 is great by NFL standards. 9 is incredible. I give him a 9 for route running. So that's a really, really high praise. And because I think route running is the most important attribute. I mean, for a receiver, if you're getting open you're getting targets. And if you're getting targets, you're getting PPR points. And at the end of the day, this is a fantasy football podcast. We want PPR fantasy points. And so I'm willing to overlook a lot if I think you're an elite route runner. And I see really, really good route running, particularly at the stem of the route, just juking guys out of their shoe. That crossover
Yeah.
that you mentioned, he just was absolutely losing guys, turning their hips, getting wide open. So I loved the separation that I was seeing him create. I would have loved to have seen some reps against press just to see how he would handle it, but it's hard for me to knock him when he didn't. So I gave him. I didn't know what to plug in to the grades. I just put 6, which is NFL average, because if I give him a 0, then that really drops his score. So I can't leave it incomplete. I've got to give him a score, and so maybe I should go 5 out of 10. I don't know, but for the route running against the stem, I gave him a really, really good grade. I loved that attribute for him. But let's get into the ball skills. What did you notice at the catch point? Body control, hands, physicality, hand fighting. What did you see here?
I thought he did a really good job, especially when he was able to stack DBs. He did a really good job, really good technique, being able to stack guys and then kind of hand fight them down low, kind of keep them back there. That's the proper way to do it, where you're not going to draw a flag. And I thought he did a really good job of that and being able to make sure that he stays on top and can catch those deep balls and build up his long speed. I didn't see too much. I think I charted 2 or 3 drops from him, and they seem more like just concentration drops. He was catching away from his body. It's not like a body catcher where they're just bouncing off his chest. So I think he has pretty good hands. I wouldn't, say that they're too far above average, but he's pretty acrobatic when he has to go up for the ball. He's a very fluid athlete overall. I really like that about his game, and it kind of translates to ball skills. It's didn't see him kind of winning in contested catches like Rome does. But that's all right. It's just not really part of his game, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, if he's a slot receiver, he's not going to be asked to do a ton of the contested
Mm-hmm.
catch stuff. But I will say this was my biggest knock on him studying the tape was not the ball skills overall, because I gave him a good grade for hands. I gave him a good, a pretty solid grade for ball tracking, pretty solid grade for body control. Like I felt like he could track it. He could go up and high point the ball. He could contort his body and catch it outside of his frame. He had reliable hands, but the physicality was just not there. I mean, I hesitate to use the word soft, but this was both in the route running and at the catch point. He just did not like it when people put hands on him. He really didn't. He would get knocked off of his spot. He would get visibly agitated. He'd be throwing up hands and begging for calls, and he just really did not like it when anybody ever put a hand on him. There were a few instances I saw where it was kind of a 50-50 ball, and he had the opportunity to, kind of do a little bit of get off me, create some space at the catch point, and he really just didn't. He let the defender go right through him. So I gave him a pretty low score for contested catch and a pretty low score for physicality. But I did think he had good, solid hands. Just not in those contested situations. That was not a strength for him. Did
Agreed.
you see any of those same concerns with physicality? Am I exaggerating this?
No, the same. Like when it comes to contested catches, it's just not his game at all.
Yeah, and not just the contested catches. I think him getting bumped off the routes is a little concerning too. It makes me think that if they had pressed him a bunch, it might have worked pretty good
Yeah,
against
I
him.
agree.
But that's my main concern is he just a slot guy? Because I
Mm-hmm.
love it when a guy has slot skills. If a guy has that positional versatility, he can win outside, he can win in the slot, teams can move him around. You get those nice matchups because sometimes because he was in the slot, he was getting matched up against safeties or their third best cornerback or a linebacker and would just dust them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't guard Jalen McMillan with a linebacker.
No.
Absolutely not. No shot. So in that sense, it can be really good for fantasy if a guy's in the slot. But I want him to be able to have that versatility to go outside too. And I don't know if that's going to translate with Jalen McMillan. Even though he's got decent size, he's 6'1", 197 pounds. He just doesn't seem to have that physicality to his game. So let's move on to the next trait here, which is his yards after the catch. What did you notice after the catch for Jalen McMillan?
I thought it was pretty solid here. Going back to that kind of like basketball crossover move, he's able to really juke guys. They use him a lot in this area, which was a little surprising for me. Like just going in the film, like just kind of seeing his, profile and build. But they would, run him on like a jet sweep across formation, then throw it to him like a halfback swing kind of play. I even saw them use him straight up out of the backfield and running wheel routes on occasion. Just to kind of give them the ball in space. And like we mentioned earlier, he has really good build up long speed. So, once he gets going, he's hard to catch, and he can defeat angles pretty easily. And to me, he showed a good awareness too, like in zone. Like if he was, finding a spot to sit in zone, kind of knowing like which side to turn and get upfield as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I graded him out slightly above average after the
Yeah.
catch. I did see some good elusiveness. Really similar to everything else we've been saying. He's clearly a finesse player. He's not a power player. And so, did I
Mhm.
see him like dragging tacklers or guys like bouncing off of him? Like, is he bullying them like a Malachi Corley? No, but I saw him juke some guys. I saw him put a little sweet spin move on there. He's got good speed, decent acceleration. So there's definitely some things that I liked after the catch. It wasn't just like a catch it and go down.
Yeah.
He could do a little bit. So yeah, I graded him pretty solid after the catch. And then overall, like athleticism, we've kind of talked about it. Burst, I put him at an NFL average. Speed, I put him above NFL average. I put him at a 7, which is good by NFL
Mhm.
standards. And when it comes to like quickness, you said you didn't think he was that quick when you're talking about his route running. I actually gave him a really high score for quickness. I thought he was more quick than fast. Maybe it was just when he got to the stem of his routes and just the shifty footwork, the way that he could plant a foot and change direction on a dime. And even some of that you saw after the catch with the jukes and things like that. I thought he was really quick. So I gave him a really good grade for quickness. Do you want to comment on that at all since we saw it a little differently?
Yeah. Yeah. When I was talking about quick earlier, I meant like really like kind of quick, choppy feet.
Mhm.
I didn't really see that. I would say I would see him as above average when it comes to quickness. I didn't see him as quite elite.
Mhm.
It, I guess it could be because he is like a long strider and like his kind of like crossover move, his legs are pretty wide apart.
Okay.
So it could be a little deceiving, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of saw him as above average there.
Yeah, I gave him an 8 out of 10 for quickness. So I just really liked that. He was a 6 for burst and a 7 for speed, but 8 for quickness. So I thought that was what stood out to me in his game in terms of his athleticism. Um, Intangibles, briefly, I'll say that I thought he had good football IQ. I thought he did a good job finding the soft spot in the zone. I thought he was a willing run blocker, despite some of our
Very
questions
well.
about physicality. Like he was much better physicality wise run blocking than he was in other areas of the game. It was interesting. Like he seemed like as a run blocker, he had a little bit of dog in there. Like he'd stick his nose in and he'd hold some blocks.
It seemed
So
like he really wanted to fight for his teammates,
yeah,
which
yeah.
kind of evident by him coming back with everybody.
Yeah, I mean that shows a lot to me that he wanted to come back even though he could have declared last year and would have probably been a day 2 pick. And the fact that he kept trying to come back from his injury, like he wasn't fully healthy, but he was just trying to get his way back on the field this year. And he definitely seems like a team player, which I love. So overall, like my total grade on him came out just barely underneath Ricky Pearsall. So it came out to a 67.5, which that's on the high end. Like that technically that designation comes out to backup with starter upside, which I'm comfortable with. Like,
Yeah,
I could even see it being higher. Like, if I'd seen some releases against press coverage and seen him dominate, like that would have boosted his grade up higher. So overall, like, again, I weight route running really heavily. So the fact that he had a 9 on that trait for me makes me want to be even higher on him. Um, I think he's probably going to be drafted to be a team's third wide receiver. He probably is going to play mostly in the slot, at least at the beginning of his career. But he's got upside for more than that. I think if
I
if
agree.
the team, especially if he ends up being somebody that can line up outside and can win against press coverage, and do some of the things that he just wasn't asked to do in college. Maybe he comes into the NFL and he's like sneaky good at those things. So I think backup with starter upside, I'm pretty happy with that, and I actually want to be higher on him even than what that would indicate. Like I want to like this guy a lot. He is an older prospect. Um, Production profile is a little iffy. Not the most physical guy. Might be limited to a slot role, but there's just a lot in his game that I really really liked. So let's move on here and talk about our second wide receiver for the night, and that is Roman Wilson out of Michigan. He is 5'11", 185 pounds, senior, so another older guy. Another former four-star prospect, but he was not the number 6 wide receiver in his class. He was the number 38 wide receiver in his class. So not super highly touted coming into college. And it took him a while. I mean, he really didn't break out until this season as a fourth-year senior. Last year as a junior, he had just 25 catches for 376 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then this year he came in, he got a career high 48 catches. So he basically doubled his catch total, 789 yards. So he more than doubled his receiving yardage total, and 12 touchdowns. That's a lot of touchdowns for less than 800 yards to get 12 touchdowns, double digits. So, yeah, interesting. I mean, obviously, Michigan was a really low volume passing attack, so there's some context there. But let's get into the tape. What did you notice about Roman Wilson as a route runner?
A lot of the same things we talked about with McMillan. Played in the slot pretty much the entire time, and therefore didn't really have to fight off against press. But man, I did notice anytime a defender got his hands on him, whether it's at the line of scrimmage or kind of getting him off his point mid route, it was kind of game play over for him. He really struggled with that, in my opinion. Um, you know, Same thing where I didn't really get to see much of a release package, but against zone, I feel like he also kind of struggled. In my opinion, he was almost like kind of late getting to his spot, or would wait too long to kind of turn around, like he'd run too close to the defender, so then they're able to come break up the play. And yeah, overall, I was really disappointed, especially after seeing all the hype the last couple months about him. Um, he, he was pretty limited at the Simmons route as well. And to me, what I saw was like, I'm faster than you, and I'm running a crossing route. You can't keep up with me across the field. And that was pretty much the times that he got open, in my opinion.
Yeah, I saw some of the same things, and honestly, it was really interesting. Like I didn't know what to expect coming into his tape because the production profile is pretty terrible. I just read it to you, um, but then like at the Senior Bowl, the beat out of the Senior Bowl practices was none of the DBs could guard him, and he was like one of the best players at Senior Bowl that week, and that's where a lot of this hype, because there was like almost no hype for him until Senior Bowl week. And then the narrative was nobody could guard him. And so I was kind of expecting to see like this sneaky good route runner. And I didn't feel like I really saw that. I thought Roman Wilson he looked a little stiff hipped for being such a small guy. He was not really fluid getting in and out of his breaks. There was not a lot of defensive manipulation. So, even when you talk about the idea of like, um, the nuance to the salesmanship of like, I'm going to nod my head this way and then I'm going to break the other way. and get the DB to flip his hips. I didn't see him really flipping the DB's hips very much at all. Like his routes looked pretty telegraphed to me. Some of them were pretty rounded. He just looked a lot more raw than I was expecting to see. And you're right, like most of the reps where he created separation, it was with speed. So yeah, overall, like the route running, I was unfortunately just a little underwhelmed with him. I think I gave him, let me pull up my score real fast. I gave him a 5 for route running. So passable, but not below NFL average. And release, I gave him a 6, so just NFL average. And again, I didn't see it a lot, like you said. So the route running was a little disappointing for me. Let's move on here to the ball skills, body control, hands, catch radius, all that kind of stuff. What did you notice with his ball skills?
I thought he was solid in this area, but not spectacular. I'd probably kind of call him NFL average, maybe slightly above. Only charted 2 drops, and they also seemed kind of like concentration drops. There were a few flashes where he's going up and high pointing the ball or catching it off, DB's head. But those were pretty few and far between. Again, could be contributing factor. It's not very big pass offense in Michigan, but as far as like physicality with hand finding stuff, I thought that was a real weakness for his game. Anytime, like I said earlier, a defender got his hands on him, was pretty much play over for him.
Yeah, so I didn't see as many of the concerns that you're noting about the physicality. I actually felt like he was pretty tough. Like he's small, but he's stocky and he's thick. I saw a couple plays, and we'll talk about this in a minute. I thought his biggest strength was like when the play breaks down and it's a scramble drill and he's moving with his quarterback. And so I saw a couple plays in those situations where he was literally getting grabbed by a DB and he just kind of like threw him off and kept running. And so I thought he had good toughness. I gave him a pretty good grade overall for his physicality. Um, Obviously, not a huge catch radius. So, I mean, he's just a small, short receiver. He didn't seem like he had a lot of wingspan. So, not a great score for catch radius. I thought his hands were pretty good. And contested catch, I gave him a much better score than I gave McMillan because even though he was smaller and he's really not built for contested catch situations, he kind of seemed like he had that dog in him. Like uh, when there was one play in particular where he's running wide open up the seam. I don't know if was a broken coverage or what. He basically just ran in a straight line and he's wide open. And McCarthy doesn't see him right away. And so he gets to the end zone. He runs out of place to run. He kind of has to stop. And then McCarthy throws it late and it's a contested. And he literally went up, reached over the defensive back's head, plucked it off of his back, and then like pulled it into the crook of his arm. It was a crazy catch.
Yeah.
And so again, like you said, it wasn't like he was doing that every other play because it's not his play style. He's not a contested catch guy. But when he was in those situations, I just thought he had a real my ball mentality that I love to see out of him. So ball skills, I mean, I gave him a good grade for hands, good grade for contested catch, good grade for body control, good grade for ball tracking. The only thing I really didn't give him a good grade on was catch radius, and he can't control that, right? Like that's a physical limitation that he has no control over. So I thought overall I was pretty impressed with his ball skills. Moving right along, let's talk about after the catch. Did you notice anything after the catch? Positive, negative, acceleration, elusiveness, all that kind of stuff?
I gave him a pretty bad grade here. I was pretty disappointed, especially like seeing his combine numbers. Like I was expecting him to be able to run away from guys or make a miss, and I don't think I hardly ever saw him, make a guy miss one-on-one. He seems very tight-hipped and doesn't have a lot of wiggle in his game. He's very linear, and I think that really limited him and Yak.
Yeah, totally agree. I saw a lot of the same things. I was pretty underwhelmed in that department too, for a lot of the same reasons. So,
He went down, I feel like, at first contact every time. I don't think I
yeah,
saw him
for the
break one
most part.
tackle.
So, um, wrapping up here, we'll talk athleticism. We kind of have hit on it as we've talked about these other things, which I love that we do that. Like athleticism doesn't matter if it's not functional athleticism. So it,
Mm.
it needs to come up when we're talking about ball skills or yards after the catch or route running. Like if your athleticism looks great on the combine, but it doesn't translate to these other areas, it doesn't even matter. But for him, I mean, he ran a 4.39 40-yard dash, which is pretty darn fast. And I do think that showed up on tape. I think when he was running in a straight line, again, not a lot of lateral ability, not a lot of wiggle, but when he was running in a straight line, he always had guys on their heels sprinting to keep up with him. I definitely think he can be a field stretcher in the NFL.
Mhm.
He at least has that in his game. And he got up to speed decently quick. Like I think his burst was better than what I saw out of Jalen McMillan as well, but he wasn't nearly as quick laterally as what I
Yeah,
saw out of Jalen McMillan. Do you agree with that assessment?
100%. Yeah, he gets up to speed pretty quick, and it's really good along speed. Doesn't really lose speed at all as he keeps going down the field, even on these 60-yard routes that he'll be running. Um, yeah, just kind of disappointing to see how limited he is laterally. I would have been a little bit more excited if he would have had that. Um,
Yeah, and if a guy's a big X receiver type, you kind of can forgive some of that
mhm.
because that's not his game, and he's gonna win a lot of those contested catches and um, but when it's a small slot guy, you kind of need him to be quick, right?
Yeah,
Like you kind of need him to have that lateral ability, and Roman Wilson just didn't. So that was disappointing. The intangibles, I think, are through the roof with this kid.
yeah,
I thought he was a really strong run blocker. The football IQ, I mentioned earlier, his best trait was off script, man. Like he just had this sixth sense that when the play was breaking down and McCarthy was getting out of the pocket, he was flipping and running with him and always giving McCarthy an option.
yeah,
And so, I mean, this he had 12 touchdowns. I saw at least 6 of them in the tape study that came on these off script scramble drills. I
yep,
mean, no exaggeration. Almost half of his touchdowns on the season, at least, I think, came in situations like this where he didn't get open on the route. Nobody got open on the route. McCarthy is getting out of the pocket, running for his life, and Roman Wilson is moving with him. And he's making a toe drag swag sideline grab. And that's been his best trait. Like it
yeah.
was all off script stuff, which I don't like. Like I love that he can do that. I love that ability. I don't love that he relied on it so much because he wasn't getting open initially. But yeah, this off script football IQ, just backyard football stuff, he was elite at it. And it
I
just seemed
100% agree. I saw the exact same thing, and I think I charted as well. Like over half his touchdowns were on these off script plays, which I feel like makes me feel a little bit lower on him because I
Mhm.
don't. You can't really depend on that for fantasy purposes. I think he's going to be one of those better NFL players than like a fantasy contributor, in my opinion. Like I feel like he's going to serve a purpose to stretch the field, kind of keep the safeties honest, and can kind of be a resource for the quarterback, when
Right.
plays break down and whatnot.
And for that to even work, like you have to be with the right quarterback, right? At
Yeah.
Michigan, he was. He had McCarthy, who could roll out of the pocket, had some mobility, great at throwing on the run. Wasn't scrambling to run, but was scrambling with his eyes downfield to make a throw downfield. So it worked.
Yep.
But I mean, like if you're playing with a Tom Brady and that's your best trait, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
If you're
Or a
playing,
quarterback with a terrible offensive line where you have no time to,
yeah,
kind of work in a scramble
even
drill.
like a Justin Fields, right? Like Justin Fields, when he gets out of the
Yeah.
pocket, he's looking to run. He's not really looking to throw it downfield like that. So it really, like Roman Wilson, to even have that trait be highlighted, would need to land in the right situation, the right spot. So yeah, I agree with you. Like I love that he can do it, but I don't love how much he depended on it because he just wasn't getting open on the initial route as often as I wanted him to. So overall, I came out lower than I was expecting to be on Roman Wilson, given all the buzz. And for me, he graded out to a 62.6, which um, comes out to average backup. And from what I saw on tape, I'm very comfortable with the grade saying that he's a backup because that's what he looked like to me. He didn't look like a starting NFL wide receiver. He didn't look like a guy that you would think would be a fantasy starter. So I'm probably going to be out on him with where I've seen him going in rookie drafts. And, it's no shot at him. It's nothing personal. We're just playing this fantasy football game and trying to, make our best evaluations that we can and projecting a guy to the next level. And is he going to score us fantasy points? And I don't see the dynasty upside with this guy because I don't see a lot of high level traits, and he's a little on the older side. And I just don't see what he does that's going to lead to a lot of fantasy value. So
Agreed.
That'll about do us for tonight. So as we wrap up here, Rupert, tell them where they can find you on Twitter/X.
You can find me at Matthew Rupert FF on Twitter, and then you can also hop in our Discord and come chat with me directly.
Absolutely. Hop in the Discord. We would love to have you guys. It'll be in the description. You can find me on Twitter/X at CouchScoutsFF. And that's also the YouTube handle is youtube.com/CouchScouts or at CouchScouts. So that's where you can find us. If you're listening on Apple Pods, you want to come over to the YouTube, check out some film breakdowns, look at our short videos, things like that. That's where you can find us on YouTube. That's where you can find me on social media. And definitely, like Rupert said, come jump in the Discord, and looking forward to getting to know you guys. So that'll do it for this week. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.